rehabilitated, and real entertaining. This is the Carl Jackson Podcast.
Welcome to the Carl Jackson Show podcast. Please subscribe to the podcast wherever you go to get your podcast: Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, and Rumble. All things social media at the Carl Jackson Show is where you can find me. Guys, I'm going to dive right into this particular podcast. This is Stephen A. Smith. Stephen A. Smith came out with a video, and I think it was entitled, let me find the title of this thing. Basically, knocking Clarence Thomas. And I want to set the record straight because it's foolishness. And I say this as a person that absolutely loves Stephen A. Smith. I love hearing his commentary when it comes to sports. I even like hearing his commentary sometimes when it comes to political issues. When I've seen him on Hannity, Levin, or heard him on Hannity, Levin, so on, etc., he offers a different perspective. He seems to be a guy that's more in the middle. What is it? But anyway, I can't find the title of this thing. It's on his Twitter account, Stephen A. Smith. But I want to dive into this. First off, let me tell you that today's podcast is brought to you by MyPillow.com. Mike Lindell at MyPillow has an offer exclusive to my listeners. Buy one, get one free of the new MyPillow 2.0. That pillow comes with the same patented adjustable feel as the original MyPillow, so you're going to be extremely comfortable. But it gets even better. It now has this temperature regulating thread that makes it softer, smoother, and even cooler. So you get buy one, get one free offer. You get a better night's rest. You also get a 10-year warranty, a 60-day money-back guarantee. All that on top of knowing that you're helping to sustain American jobs and American manufacturing right here in the US of A. Go to MyPillow.com, click on the radio listener square at the top of the page, enter my name, Carl, C-A-R-L, or if you prefer, give them a call, 800-858-0263, 800-858-0263. Tell them Carl sent you, C-A-R-L. All right, here's the video of Stephen A. Smith. Stephen A. Smith is going after Justice Thomas after the Supreme Court of the United States rejected racism by rejecting the affirmative action case last week. Again, I'm a person, I like Stephen A. Smith. I enjoy his commentary oftentimes when it comes to sports, so on, etc. He seems like a decent guy. He's a smart guy, obviously. He's a very successful black man. Now, having heard that, let's listen to Stephen A. Smith's clip or YouTube video or whatever this was, talking about Justice Clarence Thomas and basically his disappointment in Justice Clarence Thomas deciding to reject affirmative action deciding to reject the affirmative action in regards to admissions, college admissions. All right, here's Stephen A. Smith.
What really, really makes it worse is, without question, Clarence Thomas. See, I got his bio here. Born in Pinpoint, Georgia. Father abandoned the family, was raised by a grandfather in a poor Gula community near Savannah. Devout Catholic, originally intended to be a priest. Actually decided not to be that, by the way, because he became frustrated over the church's insufficient attempt to combat racism. Ended up attending Yale Law School via affirmative action. He attended law school. He was an affirmative action student. Gets better. Appointed by Ronald Reagan as chairman of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. This man once oversaw the EEOC. The very job he held was to address racial inequality in this country. He made it to the Supreme Court. Second black in the history of the Supreme Court. His predecessor was the great Thurgood Marshall. I could easily go into Clarence Thomas. And I think Dr. Michael Eric Dyson put it best. He said, this is the face of a man who climbed the ladder of affirmative action to his present perch of power, only to help destroy the very ladder on which he ascended. You used affirmative action to climb the ladder that you climbed to success, and then did everything you could to knock it down so nobody else could come up the same way you did. That is Clarence Thomas.
And that is Stephen A. Smith. Now, if you're uninformed, you think that commentary was brilliant. And again, I love Stephen A. Smith. He is way off on this. Now, does Stephen A. Smith, one has to ask the question, Stephen A. Smith is a very intelligent man. Is Stephen A. saying that at this time and point in American history, blacks are not good enough or smart enough? They can't be as smart as he is, apparently, to be able to earn their way into college without using race. Another thing, Stephen A. Smith, I don't know if he did this on purpose, but he forgot to tell his audience that it was Asians that were being discriminated against that brought the lawsuit that the Supreme Court decided on. In other words, it was minority on minority crime, if you will. He somehow forgot to mention that to his audience. And let me ask Stephen A. Smith, because he's so brilliant on this. Is Stephen A. Smith trying to say that there's been no progress in 50 years? He's a young buck compared to Clarence Thomas. Is he trying to say that there's been no progress when it comes to race relations and when it comes to college admissions? By the way, overwhelmingly run by white liberal Democrats. Is Stephen A. Smith trying to say that there's been no change, no progress in 50 freaking years? You understand how uninformed you have to be to believe and to look at this Stephen A. Smith video and say, right on, right on, right on. Let me read you part of this column. This is from the Washington Post. A progress report on the status of blacks in American higher education reveals an extraordinary gender gap. Now, again, I'm using a liberal resource, the Washington Post. Black women now are earning college degrees at twice the rate of black men. The number of black women earning bachelor's degrees has increased by 55% since the mid-1970s. 55% since the mid-1970s? Stephen A. Smith forgot to mention this progress. The report notes compared with an increase of 20% among black men. So the report has noted 55% increase in black women attending college since the 1970s, 20% of black men, an increase of 20% of black men attending college since the 1970s. The differences are even more profound in the areas of law or medicine. Again, I'm reading the Washington Post. Among black women, the number of degree earners has soared 219%. But for black men, it has increased only 5%. The number of black men earning master's degrees since the 1970s has actually dropped by 10%. Okay, so a lot of black men that are earning bachelor's but are not earning master's degrees. It has risen 5% for black women. That's a pretty good. Honestly, that's pretty good. That's pretty amazing. Oh, you know what I forgot to tell you? That this article was written in 1997. And we were watching the progress then. We're talking about 26 years later. And Stephen A. Smith, I trust him enough to believe that he's not doing this intentionally, forgot to tell you about the progress we saw within 20 plus years, let alone 50 years. Now, let's take this to Clarence Thomas, because for some reason, these people always want to bash Clarence Thomas. He's a Uncle Tom. He's a sellout. He closed the back door. He got in on affirmative action and then he closed the door. Well, let's talk about this for a second. So one of the issues that Stephen A. Smith mentioned was that Clarence Thomas, a devout Catholic, didn't feel like the church was doing enough to combat racism. Okay, so Clarence Thomas used to be on the left. He was a Marxist. He was a self-proclaimed Marxist. All right, Stephen A. Smith didn't mention that. So you have to ask Stephen A. Smith, is it possible that blacks can be racist too? Oh, blacks can't be racist. That good? Because that's what some of his audience would say. Blacks can't be racist, except God, the ultimate authority, would have the final say on whose heart can be racist and not. Can a black man determine if I'm racist? Can a white man or black or white? Yeah, anybody can be racist, regardless of skin color. There's no affirmative action plan in heaven. Now, another thing that I want to mention. What makes Stephen A. Smith and his uninformed audience believe that Clarence Thomas thinks he isn't combating racism, since the case was specifically brought about by Asians who admittedly, the colleges admitted they were discriminating against Asians and keeping them off of their college campuses because they were too freaking smart. So what makes you think that Clarence Thomas didn't feel like he was combating racism? He grew up in poverty, right? So he should understand the struggle. That's basically the implication. All right. So Clarence Thomas grew up in poverty. His father abandoned him. He saw affirmative action as a way to move up the ladder. Affirmative action, by the way, another thing that Stephen A. Smith didn't tell his audience. Affirmative action was implemented by Republican President Richard Nixon and Black Republican Art Fletcher. Stephen A. Smith forgot to mention that. So you can thank the Republican Party for affirmative action. All right. Because Democrats weren't doing anything about it. It's just like the lie of the big switch. They try to steal our ideas to pretend like they're for black people. Meanwhile, you still got Stephen A. Smith, people like Stephen A. Smith that are saying, oh, black people are, they're oppressed. That's basically what he's implying. And they need affirmative action to get, or we need affirmative action to get our legs up. Have you ever considered this? Since Stephen A. Smith is a young buck compared to Justice Clarence Thomas, again, progress. Have you ever considered that just like the Asians that were too smart, there was a point in time when Republicans that implemented affirmative action thought, you know what? There are some damn smart black people. People as smart as Stephen A. Smith, people as smart as a Michael Eric Dyson, which I'll get to in a minute because it's really funny that he mentioned Michael Eric Dyson. So maybe at the time when Republicans implemented affirmative action across college campuses, do you think they thought with a Clarence Thomas who is freaking brilliant on the court that this guy, just like the Asians, is too smart, and yet he's being denied access to Yale because of the color of his skin? Do you think that happened then? And perhaps there was a switch when white liberal bigots took over a lot of these college campuses, these admission boards, where they went from like, oh, we just don't want to feel our white guilt. And so what we're going to do, check mark, you're black, check mark, you're in. Like Joy Reid of MSNBC. Does anybody doubt that Joy Reid should have never attended Harvard? Does anybody doubt? Does anybody think that Joy Reid of MSNBC, NBC, whatever, is even in the same atmosphere as Justice Clarence Thomas as far as IQ is concerned? If you do, your IQ isn't that high. This is absolutely insane. So it's possible that Justice Clarence Thomas was actually allowed to ascend up the ladder because when you look at the man, it's obvious he's brilliant as hell, the most brilliant justice on the Supreme Court, and more brilliant than Thurgood Marshall. I hate to burst your bubble. One of the most brilliant justices in American history. And he won't get the credit because you got people like Stephen A. Smith that won't give him the credit. They're so down to call him an Uncle Tom and rather than give him the credit that he deserves. Is it possible that times are better now? Is it possible that that's the reason why Justice Clarence Thomas was allowed to attend Yale Law School? Because they looked at him and said, this guy is brilliant. The only reason he's being denied access is because he's black. As opposed to Joy Reid, who the only reason she's being given access is because she's black. Because there's no way in hell you can convince me that lady was smart enough to attend Yale or to attend Harvard. The same is true with Kareem Jean-Pierre. Some blacks are smarter than other blacks, just like some whites are smarter than other whites, just like some Asians are smarter than other Asians. Oh, he talked about the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Of course, that should be a point of contention, right? We should really get on that. This was a man appointed by Ronald Reagan, no less, right? Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. How do you know, Stephen A. Smith? How do you know that while he was in that position, that he didn't see such progress? Because obviously this 1997 article 26 years ago, how do you know that at that time, Clarence Thomas didn't see enough progress where he said, by God, this stuff is finally changing. It's not like it was when I attended Yale Law School, when I was being denied. Now, blacks are starting to get the opportunities that they deserve. And so we're turning the page. We're making progress. During the Reagan administration, when we made Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday a holiday, I think we were starting to see progress by then, Stephen A. There's no context of history. And I say this as a person, again, I'm a fan. I like Stephen A. Smith. But this is the problem. When these guys that are in sports are just black first, you know what I'm saying? Don't look at or provide you information that is based upon context. And then he mentioned Michael Eric Dyson. Do you guys know Michael Eric Dyson, a man that claims the name of God, one of the most bigoted people I've ever heard? Michael Eric Dyson, that fool better repent. He is smart as a whip. And I would argue that he's insecure. If that guy just says a sentence, he has to sound the profundity of blah, 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 blah. He uses the biggest white English words that you could ever imagine. It's almost as if Michael Eric Dyson is so insecure that he's got to prove to his audience, wherever he is, how smart he is so that he can belittle others. One of the biggest race hustlers and bigots out there, Michael Eric Dyson. And he says that Clarence Thomas used affirmative action and then essentially shut the door behind him, with no context of history whatsoever. And basically his argument and Stephen A. Smith's argument, if we're being honest, is guys, it's really an elitist point of view if you think about it. There's not enough smart blacks like us. When you think about it, that's what Stephen A. Smith is saying. It's very condescending. There's not enough smart blacks like myself and Michael Eric Dyson that can make it to college and succeed based upon merit. There's too many white people out there that are still keeping us oppressed because of our skin color. Meanwhile, white liberals vote overwhelmingly, Democrat, and they run these institutions. Democrats run these institutions. Honestly, man, I hope people are growing sick and tired of this nonsense. This is why I don't believe that you should kiss the booty of black Democrats. I think it is time to go on offense. The only people that are racist, the most racist party to ever exist and still exists within the United States of America, is the Democrat Party. Make no mistake about it. And Stephen A. Smith, in my opinion, just proved it again. All right, guys, I appreciate you tuning in to this edition of the Carl Jackson Show podcast, your daily dose of objective truth in a world of confusion and lies. All right. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast wherever you go to get your podcast. Please subscribe. Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, and Rumble. Also, you can follow me on all things social media at The Carl Jackson Show is where you can find me. Until next time, guys, don't grow weary doing good. God bless you.